The poll is there. Yeah, okay, awesome, thank you. Okay, we'll start. So, for our first session tonight, for the whole summit, we have three gentlemen with us. Alexander Pestalozzi from Mueller Asia, John Cheng from Innovate 360, and Manav Gupta from Brinc. Hello! So before we start, I'd like to invite the audience to do a poll. So you'll see on the right side beside chat, click on polls, and we can actually load all three questions now. So I'll ask the guests to do the same after I introduce them, and we will compare the poll results and the answers. It's gonna be fun. Okay, so let me do a quick introduction of everyone here. First of all, we have John Cheng joining us from Singapore. John brings in the unique angle of having been literally born into the traditional food industry. Third generation in a 17-year-old family business in rock sugar. You're modernizing your family business and at the same time venturing into cutting edge areas, including alternative protein. I've had the opportunity to work with John over the last year or so. I can't believe how much you've already done over the past year. I just need to constantly remind John to take care of himself. I don't know how much he's sleeping or at all, right? Then we have Manav Gupta from Brinc, running multiple accelerator programs, including food tech, and having made 20 investments in the alt protein space already. So what Manav brings to the table, I think, is having been involved very early on in spaces like IoT. And you described, like we talked about this before, right? Like 3 years yelling at the board. And I think the parallels that can be drawn there would make this an amazing discussion. So Manav also has experience living and working in Guangdong of China on and off for 10, 15 years. So it's great. Last but not least, we have Alex, again, bringing a different perspective to the table, managing the family office of Theo Mueller. Yes, it's Mueller, biggest dairy companies in Europe and the world. Alex is running this office out of Hong Kong, looking at deal flows within China, within Asia and other emerging markets. So the idea of putting this session together actually came after Alex and I talked about what's going on in the sector and certain risks that we see that need to be addressed. So I think our, let's see, can I see the poll results? Let me just vote as well so that I can see. Yeah, once I vote, I can see. Whoa, okay, moment of truth. All right, let's kickstart our session with this. Everyone can see the poll results, right? I think for the audience, if you look at on the right side polls, and then if you have voted, then you can see like the result. So I am not trying to trick anyone, right? Like these are legit, real newspaper headlines. So let's go there. I'll start sharing my screen. Okay, so John, Manav, and Alex, you should have a piece of paper. So for these three news headlines, you can vote either like or fake. Let's go with the first one. Okay, true or false. And for the audience, if you double click on, so I'm sharing the news headline now, if you double click on that screen, you can maximize that. Okay, number one, Chinese government rolling out a plan in 2017 to reduce the country's meat consumption by 50% by 2030. So 65% of the audience said that it's true. 35% said false. What do our guests say? Vote now. 2 fake, 1 like. All right, this is gonna be fun. Yay!
I did think I was at like in the very beginning, and then I have since learned and changed my mind.
Yay! So let's see. All right. So, oops, fake news. So I put here. This is actually China Morning Post. So what it's saying is that basically the actual differences between the new guidelines and the old ones are very small, which means there is actually no news. The guidelines come out every 10 years. So I've actually read the guideline myself. It's in Chinese only. Well, I cannot see the number 50% mentioned anywhere. And in fact, if you only take the numbers within the guidelines, you can never come to the conclusion of the 50% cut. You have to take, and I think that's what the journalists did, take a number outside of the guideline. It's a relatively high current meat consumption number. Take that number, compare it with the lowest number within the guideline. Then you can make up the 50%. But that's very different from saying that the Chinese government has announced that it's gonna cut meat consumption by 50%, right? Okay, let's go to number 2. Let me roll this up. China signs $300 million deal to buy lab-grown meat from Israel. All right, time to vote. What do you say, like or fake? Manav.
Oh, sorry, I was voting.
Turn it around. Your like is okay. 2 fake. Oh, all fake.
I was like, but yeah, I'll just be controversial.
If you like it, but it's too good to be true. Is that what it is?
That's exactly.
All right. So from the audience, 50. Oh, this is closer. 57% say true. 43% say false. So moment of truth. There we go. False. Fake news. So this is actually what it is. Israel and China did sign a trade agreement. It's a $300 million clean tech agreement. There is actually no explicit mention of cultivated meat. Also, it is just very far-fetched from that to actually China now importing $300 million worth of cultivated meat from Israel. Okay, last one. This one, Alex actually gave me this idea. So, wait, I reviewed it too soon. Nestle is investing $100 million in a plant-based factory in China. What do you think? True or false? Everybody's saying fake now because like that's like all the audience is saying 87% saying it's true, 13% saying it's okay. I'm gonna let Alex explain this because Alex is so passionate about busting this myth.
Wow, we put me on the spot there. No, actually, yeah, it was interesting because I've seen it quite a few times. I've seen people quite a few times talking about this and sharing it on LinkedIn and all like saying, oh, China's going the right way. But then I wanted to dig down and figure it out a little bit more deeply and actually went to see on the press release from China Nestle. And there I actually said, yes, they're investing $100 million in China, but the most of that will go into actually pet food manufacturing and everything else. And then a small portion of that actually will be for plant-based. But a lot of people just read plant-based and $100 million and then took it over and communicated it that way.
Yeah. So I hope everybody had fun with like starting with this poll and the voting. I sort of like, yay! So I want to like take a step back and explain why we're doing this. Alex, you've jokingly said that since you're the evil dairy guy, like you don't want to point these things out in social because people might question your intention. Now, I and many others here are obviously pro-protein, but the reason why I'm also keen to expose these fake news is because I see them as huge risks to the sector. Like people are probably spreading these positive news with the best intentions, but I don't think it is a wise thing for us to build a sector based on misinformation, build a bubble, and it will burst somehow, right? So I think take the 50% meat consumption cut in China as an example. If we actually take the time and look at the guideline, at least from my reading of it, I could see that there's a huge undertone of protein diversification that's actually recommended there. Like the government is actually recommending people to eat more fish, egg, and dairy, and sort of get their protein not only from like red meat, but also from fish and all these other. So I think instead of sort of every startup jumping in and like putting this 50% meat cut in their pitch deck, what they should do is actually get to the facts and get to the bottom of it. And then what they might then find is that, oh, actually alternative seafood might be the next big opportunity, right? So I think it's very important for us to get to the bottom of the facts instead of just spreading news and just passing it on like that. So I'm gonna open this up for what will be a very lively discussion from our rehearsal. Let me start with Alex. So share with us like the biggest risk that you see in the way that some people are approaching the alt protein sector.
Yeah, more than welcome to do that. I think it's a very interesting subject, and you know, it's I think similar to what Bruce said before. There's currently a mismatch in how we eat and how we feed at this moment in time, and I think what needs to happen is there needs to be a shift. But because this is such an emotionally loaded topic, I do feel a lot of people sometimes bend the truth. I'm not saying lying. Truth to kind of push this forward, and I think yes, you should, because it's a very important subject. But if you look at it from an investing point of view, it's the bending the truth makes it very, very tricky. And I think this is where we have to make this differentiation. Am investing in the sector a person who's return oriented, all the animals, how do you say, the animal well-being? And this for me are two different kind of investment theses. That you say, look, I just want to.
Oh, oops, just lost him.
We just lost Alex. It's okay. I think Manav can like take this away. You know where.
I'm happy to jump in, and you know that me and Alex, you know, usually spar and debate these topics. And we have since he first started coming over and reviewing our teams. I think it's definitely a very emotionally loaded topic, and I think we all want to believe that these large activities are true, that these statements are true. The reality is, I think we are definitely embellishing, elaborating a little bit across the board, and I think we have to find a way to definitely ground it. But I can't imagine us losing the passion and energy of this space. Alex, I jumped in just to elaborate on what you were about to say, and hopefully also share. You know, I think the energy and passion. Go ahead. I'll let you continue, then I can jump in.
No, so the energy and passion is absolutely needed for this sector, because I think it puts the focus on. But I think especially for investors who see this as an investment category that should provide returns, I think it's very, very much important to kind of get to the truth. And I think stories like the 3 points that we had before could mislead certain investors. And then if investors who are misled feel like this sector is actually not that great, then we're kind of losing the focus of the overall movement where we want to go. We want to feed the planet. We want to feed the 9.3 billion people, and we want to feed them in a healthy, sustainable way. And I think for that, yes, we need the passion, but we also need the investors and not the charity people who are like, okay, look, I don't care where the money goes, but I want to make money with this, because then you're going to attract the millions and actually the billions that is needed to drive it. Because I mean, especially on the, for me, a clean, that is the future. But in order to get there, we need infrastructure investments, and we will not get these infrastructure investments purely from the charities. We need the serious investor, and as Bruce said, we need the governments. We need the governments to help facilitate this.
I 100%. Sorry, Elaine, go ahead.
Sorry, I just, because John is like the nicest guy I've ever met. I will constantly like, I'm gonna like ask John, because otherwise he won't jump in. I just want to ask John like a super quick question, right? Do you see yourself as a charity investor?
Sometimes. we do. I mean, so at Innovate 360, we do invest in passion projects, but you know, that's where it brings alive a lot of you know, actual dreams come true, because you never know when these startups will actually, you know, become a $1 billion company. But you know, I agree, you know, you need to know your information, your data, Asia is not one big market. That's for one. The other two thing is that we want to invest in companies that have some fundamentals fundamental understandings. You don't want to get into startups that give you big numbers and aren't able to come out with it. Then you create a bubble, and that's not good for the industry.
Sorry, Manav, I cut you off. Please continue.
No, I 100% concur. I think with that here, I think that we are, if you look at the volume of deals that are being done in the space, I think about 9,000 are at the early stage right now. And if you just look at, that category, it's extremely high risk capital, right? And I think extremely high risk capital, early stage investors recognize they're in an alternate asset investment category. There is risk. Passion is definitely important in the founders, in their energy, and their ability to move mountains and get stuff. I think there's tremendous amount of regulation in the cultivated space and passion to power through, and I think that's across the board. So I think investors definitely need to be grounded. They definitely need to read all the great research reports that are coming out from GFI and so many other players. And keep an open eye out. I think overall, we're going to look at the category and recognize the category has tremendous growth potential. I think it's just the merit-based investments need to be evaluated correctly, right? And I think there's nothing wrong with choosing founders. We always look at this as math versus magic. I think you need a balance. We've seen a lot of great magic in our lives, and we've seen that there's so many variables that are just impossible to predict when you make an early stage investment that can completely transform a business from ground up and their potential, whether it's the category becoming hot or a founder finding the right commercial partnership and collaboration. So I think there's definitely got to be a balance, but I'm not condoning fake news.
Yeah, and I kind of want to follow up with a question with a more sort of Asia focus. So, Manav, you've done this before, right? 3 years of yelling at the board in IoT. I'm wondering, how you're seeing the Asia alternate protein industry, where it is at, and as Alex said, right? Are we sort of the kind of passion, mission-driven stage? We're into having to attract traditional institutional investors, people who are looking at, numbers for numbers, the business for business. Where are we standing right now?
My viewpoint, I think, is definitely early days. When I first moved to Hong Kong after living in China for 10 years, we started yelling at the top of our voice that IoT is the future. The Hong Kong government needed to position itself as an IoT center of excellence because we saw that the core tenets and infrastructure were already here, which included manufacturing, access to supply chains, trade, finance, distribution, all the manufacturers in China and so forth. We yelled for 5 years, and we hosted small events, big events. We started doing investments, and I think it took us 4 or 5 years. We wrote white papers. We're finally starting to see that category now, emerge as a category that the government is putting money into. All the tech parks are deploying capital. There's a number of fantastic unicorns that have come out of Hong Kong now and be built in China. I think we're very early days in terms of talent, in terms of local ecosystem, in terms of government support, and I think we all just need to keep yelling for a little while. And I think that's at least the role that we have, is to try and continue with GFI to create awareness and hopefully create some great companies. So I think we're very early days.
I love that Manav keeps trying to advertise for us. Thank you so much. That's super.
How much did you pay him? How much did you pay him?
but I think Manav is right. I mean, this is a right sector to be in because you have all the tech in the world, and if you can't even feed the population, then that's a big problem. I think in Singapore we had this issue in the 1980s. We were pushing out all the agriculture and we were welcoming high-tech manufacturing. We've grown our financial service sectors, but one thing that Singapore realized was that food security is one important factor, and it's really about feeding the population, being resilient, and especially with COVID, that's actually made this investments into food innovation, alternative protein, and a very interesting sector and a very important sector for sustainability in terms of population.
John, I want to know, is it different in Singapore, because the Singapore government is so progressively pushing this? Do you still feel like at this stage you're yelling at the void, you're putting money in there because you feel that it's the right thing to do, but who knows what's going to happen? You're going to have to still put in a few years of that, or do you think that it's happening faster in Singapore?
Yeah, I think because of particularly with COVID, Singapore is a small country. We have absolutely very little farmland, and every space that we have, it's residential, commercial. Farmland is we don't. I think right now we're somewhere between 5 to 10% in terms of producing our own nutritional needs in Singapore. So with COVID, everyone started suffering from supply chain, but we felt it the most. We had a very diverse sourcing, but when the countries have COVID themselves, they start to think about, okay, we rather feed our own people. Maybe we should cut our supply to Singapore, for example. And with the government launch 30 by 30, it's a shout out to Singapore. Tell people that we want to feed 30% of Singaporeans. 30% of the nutritional needs must be produced in Singapore by 2030. And it's gone so far to giving out seeds to residents, telling them, hey, you know what? Why not think about planting as well? We even have little new towns, the Sungai Tengah area, where it's residential with little farmlands, where it encourages people to start planting things sustainably. The government has started to invest and attract a lot of alternative protein, cell culture, and we have quite a number of startups doing this in Singapore already. So I think Singapore is moving really fast in this space because for its own need to survive, and I think that's spurring a lot of innovation around the industry, but also around the region as well. And that's how we got to meet each other, right, Elaine?
Yeah, so when we met each other, John and I, the first time we met, and then there were 20 cameras shooting us eating a dim sum, right? John was there, it's She All Meats press conference. You were there because you were in it.
Yeah.
I was just there because I was I want to eat this thing, try to stay out.
Yeah, time flies.
Yeah, fun time. So we have heard a little bit about Hong Kong and Singapore. I like that, John, previously we've talked about this, and you said something that I really like, is that getting into Hong Kong and Singapore doesn't mean that it get you access into Asia markets. So I'm going to turn to Alex now. You've mentioned something to me before as well. You said the West Coast is really a low-hanging fruit. The market is there, the talents are there, the money is ready. It's already available. It's actually easy. But Asia is a different story, isn't it?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think if you're right now, how do you say, alternative protein company, if it's plant-based or cell-based, and you have to think about two things, right? You have to think, okay, where are my investors who are going to give me the money so I can grow? And the other thing I need to think about is, where are my consumers, right? Who's going to consume alternative protein? Who's going to consume alternative dairy, for example, if we take something closer to my heart? And the West Coast, maybe a little bit of the East Coast around New York, and then it's going to get really, really tricky. So, I mean, as we see now kind of this shift, and we're talking in this panel about Asia, it's where are the Asian alternative protein companies? Where are the Asian cell-based companies? And yes, we have the Brinc incubator, we have other incubators in China, but a lot of the companies that they intake are actually not from within Asia. Like, how many Chinese cell-based companies do we have out there? How many Chinese plant-based companies do we have out there? And that kind of goes back to me again. If I have a great idea for a cell-based company, it's so much easier for me to move to the West Coast, find the necessary investors, and have the necessary market. Because for me, still of the big question marks around it is, yes, we have Beyond and we have Impossible now trying to infiltrate China, right? And they have done successfully in Singapore, selling a few burgers there. They have successfully selling a few burgers in Hong Kong, but let's go into a tier 3 city in China that has just started eating beef and most probably dairy, because dairy is really good. So they've eaten a lot of dairy. And now somebody comes and tells them, forget that you just started to eat beef. Now this is the plant-based version, and this is going to be the next thing. And I think this is where I want to put the connection back to Bruce, where he said, this will work if we have a product that is at least as good tasting as the current beef, or better, and if we have a product that is at least cheaper or at the same level as the current beef. And I would say we don't at this moment in time. So I think it's going to be quite difficult until we get there to convince Asia as a total to start looking into alternative proteins. So I give a lot of credit for these companies who are right now in Singapore, like John mentioned, and who are trying to push that through, or like Manav said, who are yelling for the next most probably 3 to 5 years, because if they will go into the US, they don't need to yell. They just go like this, and people are going to give them money, right? Even in Europe, we had another, I'm not naming names, but we had another company just got 10 million, and it's like, it's really easy. Whereas in China, I think you're having an uphill battle, because people are just waking up to different sources of protein, and it's not like that they consume beef for the last 20 years and are looking for something newer and fresher. So I think China is very tricky, but if you win, you win big.
I think, Alex, to add on, in China especially, I think, you know, it's a different monster over there. I think for the longest time, you know, we're so used to eating mock meats, you know, vegetarian, you know, and then, you know, suddenly you have, you know, your burgers. You know, one thing is that it's not new. This is not new. You know, there's so many vegetarian options, vegan options, but we know it as mock meat. So, you know, getting into China with just being a burger, it's not gonna be so easy. I think, firstly, cuisine is one. You know, it's not everyone eats burgers. You know, although Shake Shack it's amazing in Shanghai. If you go there, it's crowded. But you know, I think one thing about Beyond Burger and Impossible Meats is that they've managed to get the marketing out. They've done well doing the marketing, and you know, China takes on to marketing, branding. The Chinese market, the consumers there, they like products that are branded. They like the trends. But to get the whole population on the burger, you know, you could do that in the US. Everyone eats burgers as part of the diet, but not in China. China, it's more complex. You have your soups, you have your different cuisines. Unless they come up with more variety, like you said, price, I think affordability and convenience. And yeah, people are still, you know, they still want their steak if they do go into the Western side. Yeah, so it's gonna take a lot more effort than just this.
Can you go first?
I mean,
I can
go ahead, Manav. No, I just want to, because I'm also reading the comments on the right side as well while we're talking, and then to some of the how do you say, in regards that the Chinese want to eat healthy, and that's why Beyond and Impossible is the right alternative. And I'll be very honest with you, they're not healthy. They don't harm the, thank you, John. They don't harm the animal, but it's not healthy. So I am all about cell-based, and I really think that this will be the alternative. But I think right now, the key thing, if we want to talk about metrics, is repeat purchasing of non-vegans, non-vegetarians who not doing it for the first time. Hey, look at me, Instagram, I'm eating a Beyond Burger. This is crazy, it just tastes like meat. But who regularly go back and every Monday decide, I'm going to eat Beyond. And I'm personally thinking, look, if I want to eat vegetarian one day a week, maybe I want to eat something that's actually healthy and tastes great, right? So I'm not dissing Beyond Impossible. I think it's tremendous what they've done to create the awareness, but I think the next step is to create healthy solutions that have a sustainability, that are gonna, how do you say, feed the planet, and that actually taste good.
So maybe I can just chime in on the China or Asia strategy. I think there's two main parts, right? I think the first part is we really need to find more homegrown entrepreneurs who truly understand, homegrown entrepreneurs, homegrown operators that understand the knowledge to properly localize products with local taste profiles, commercialization strategies, and so forth, and can properly understand the nuance of the market. I think we definitely need a lot more of those. I think, as John mentioned, there's such a large history of eating mock meats in China. India is probably the only country in the world that has growth in vegetarianism versus every other country. It's actually declining. We all like to believe that meat is on the decline, but that's not the truth. It's actually growing exponentially. So the only real path are flexitarians. But I think at the end of the day, we need to find these homegrown entrepreneurs that understand their market. I think it's going to be really tough for an international company to come in and try and navigate China, India, or these markets without really, strong local support. I think the second part, I think that's really important in terms of trying to identify local talent, is I think we need to play to the strengths in Asia. So I think US and Israel have obviously been leaders in stem cell biology and tissue culture and so forth, and that's why they have such strong clean meat or cultured meat entrepreneurs. I think as we look at Hong Kong, one of the companies we've invested in, Avant, which is obviously a homegrown hero, one of their founders was building medical genetics and genomics, had a medical genetics and genomics background, and then kind of pivoted into the space. We had another company called Shanti Global, who's was working in one of the largest flavoring companies in the pharmaceutical space, and then pivoted into the space. So I think we need to find the parallel industries and the parallel, categories that have overlap, and find founders and or engineers that have strength and can pivot into this category as they see potential, and maybe even facilities, labs, et cetera, in universities and in other locations that could enable those type of entrepreneurs. So I think there's two big parts to it. One is really understanding the nuance of the market, and then I think the second is finding strengths in the local ecosystems rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, because that's just going to take too long.
Yeah, I think we are going to go to Q&A in a minute. So anything else that you want to say? Here's your chance, Alex.
Yeah. Yes, and I just wanted, because I saw that in one of the chats, the question about the infrastructure investments, and I think it's the same kind of what Bruce addressed in regards why I think it shouldn't be companies, but actually it should be, how do you say, countries. And I think the infrastructure investments on the clean meat is, you need a lot of medium, you need a lot of bioreactors, and we're not just talking about a few hundred. I mean, I think it was actually Good Food Institute who came out with the number. If you want to replace 5% of the current meat consumption, you need 400 liters of medium that just don't exist right now, right? So it's not individual companies. There needs to be a government initiative. And I totally agree with Bruce said, if you as a country, let's say China, India, decide, okay, I'm going to build that infrastructure, you will be remembered forever, because you're solving one of the most essential questions on feeding people.
Yeah, I want to ask that there's one question about shortage of homegrown talents that I want to dive a little deeper into on your views on it. So, Manav, you've actually run quite a few cohorts in your food tech program now, and I've met with most of them as a mentor. Most of them are startups interested in the Asia markets, but very few are actually from Asia. I'm just wondering sort of why is that the case, and how long do you think it will take to kind of fill that talent gap, local talent
I think it's similar to the previous point, but it's a tough one. I think we need to find the parallel players, the parallel industries. We always believe in a convergence of international with local talent. Every market we've opened, we've usually gone into emerging markets first. We're usually, kind of head first, working with the governments very closely to try and identify what are the enablers, holders that really build a strong.
I think it's not just me. I think Manav is a little bit, connection is not that great. Let me quickly jump to John to, are you back? Okay, we'll come back to you, Manav. Let me quickly jump to John. Like, I think there are more local startups in Singapore, partly because how much support they're getting, right?
Yeah.
And you obviously have been working with a lot of them. So I'm wondering, like, have you been seeing sort of the local startups, like, what are the strengths, right, of being local? Do they come up with more kind of appropriate product idea, for lack of a better word? Yeah, can you share with us a bit of that?
So we see a lot of, and I think, I guess I think government intervention is very important, because that pulls together the different ecosystem players, from your venture funds to your accelerators, incubators, the infrastructure required, the institutional support, the students. So because of that, and even also because of COVID, the measures that have, like, there's just a fund being launched right now to enhance startups to set up businesses, because with COVID, a lot of the old businesses have been lost. So the government's promoting a lot of these startups to come out, and we've seen a lot of startups in the last two, 3 years that have been popping up. From cultured meats like your Shoke Meats, your Turtle Tree Meats, SGR Labs, to your alternative proteins, and it's amazing how everything's coming about, but it's really government intervention by one. And for us, we have some infrastructure, like we have our shared labs, kitchen. We partnered with like Big Idea Ventures, but I think more importantly, to make this whole ecosystem succeed, it's collaboration. It's not duplicating resources. It's not it's trying to do something like the West has been doing, and attracting that. It's gonna take effort. The governments need to come together. Everyone needs to realize the problem about feeding 9.8 billion people in 2050, or 9.7, 9.8 billion people in 2050. Everyone needs to realize that with all kinds of tech, you can have all kinds of tech, but if you don't have food at the end of the day, you're gonna die. so it's interesting because I think we want to have a lot of these startups also that bring different sets of expertise, and getting them to work together, and that will help boom the whole industry in this part of the world.
Yeah, so I'm hearing sort of, yes, a lot more money needs to be poured into this. Hopefully partly that will be from governments, because they have deep pockets, definitely, and they see the value in investing into the future. Alex, before we go on to Q&A, what do you want to see as more of from a traditional investment point of view, that startups should be looking at, or what you are looking for, right, for traditional investors to be comfortable to start playing in this game too?
I mean, I like what Manav uses with math versus myth. So most probably traditional investors are most probably looking more towards math, right? So we want to see returns. We want to see success stories. Yes, we have Beyond, fantastic success story. Most probably also a lot of first mover that we have in there. But we want to see success stories as a continuation, because I can tell, okay, we got Beyond. On the other hand, I can say we have Juicero. If I would have invested in Beyond and in Juicero at the right times, I would be equal, right? So we need to see more success stories, and most probably we're going to see more success stories on market plant-based companies, because they're just much closer to being profitable, and it's going to take us a little bit longer to get on the cultivated meat, the cultivated dairy side. But I think once you have these success stories based with facts, I think this is where then the mainstream, not the mainstream investor, but the professional investor will actually pay attention to it, and he's not going to say, okay, this has been a fad, it just went up and suddenly there was too many companies that blew up and then everybody shies away. And I want to avoid that this happens. So I want to see, how do you say, fundamental science-driven companies that create valuations because there's actual science behind it. And we talked about this before. I think food tech is a completely over-exaggerated terminology for the sector, because a lot of these companies are food ingredients companies where they switch around the ingredients. There's maybe a little bit of tech, but you don't justify that kind of valuation. So this is what we talked about before, a little bit more on the myth side, that, hey, look, if I just add food tech, I put a robot on the page, and then I can decide to be 20 times revenue multiples, and that's my valuation. That's fantastic. But if a lot of these companies will get burned like that. And so we need to that, how do you say, that middle ground where you actually have tech and you have sustainable solutions and you're actually profitable. People will make money with you, and then the professional investors will flock to this and will take this not as a fad, but an actual sustainable asset class that you want to partake in that. I mean, we can use clean tech as an example from before, right? At one point, all the big funds added, and we do clean tech. There's billions of money flowing into clean tech, and a lot of people lost money and got burned, and then people shied away from it. And I think this is a little bit where, yes, we need passionate people, we need passionate founders to drive it forward. We need success stories, but these success stories should be based on fact.
Right, Manav, you dropped off a little bit there. Would you like to say something before we move on to Q&A?
No, the statement is magic. So
yes,
but I think they're very similar, and they do overlap to some extent, right? So I think we need a lot of magic, and we need it to be grounded with science, and that's what usually creates some fantastic founders and entrepreneurs.
Awesome. Okay. On that note, we'll move on to Q&A. So there is a pin there telling everyone, if you have questions for speakers, to send a direct message to our amazing GFI Viola. So Viola is gonna now give me a list of questions that, because unfortunately we cannot get to everyone. So here are the shortlisted questions. Okay, we have 5 of them. Let's do this. Okay. Someone asked, I would love to hear the thoughts on how they think the regulatory environment is different in APAC. Are countries more or less likely to be open to alt protein than the West? Who wants to take that, the regulatory environment?
I mean, I think you can look at the regulatory environment in China recently with for example, Impossible trying to get in the GMO issues, for example. That was recent. I think there's just a lot more definition, perhaps by the governments, because there's just that many more parties knocking on the door and trying to push the boundaries. And GMO in most markets are pretty well, accepted. But I think there's a lot of work to still be done. And the good thing is groups and companies are banding together and creating committees and groups and associations and trying to tackle this in a cohesive way. I think Singapore is doing a fantastic job at being very open to a lot of this dialogue across the board, and there's some fantastic companies that are kind of leading the way. So it's hard to answer that question, I think, with very specific, because it's such a broad market. But maybe John Alex will have better answers than I do.
Well, I think in terms of regulatory, I think we're still in the nascent stage. So a lot of questions still being asked. I mean, really, how much does that's why I think it's very important that government has a very big part in this, because they can make the regulations, set up quick task teams that can actually look into all these regulations, like what are the ingredients. But often, they take heed to the major countries. I think Singapore also takes look at, for example, their FTA, the bigger countries, how do they approve all these regulatories. So it has to be a chain reaction. Different governments around Asia have to look at each other and say, you know what, this has been approved here. Maybe we could consider approving it as well. Yeah, there's no one absolute answer, but I think governments need to play a part, recognize that this is important, and get it moving.
All right, we'll do. Sorry, Manav, did you want to add to that?
No, I think the only thing I wanted to say is yeah, I mean, I think the governments just need to recognize the potential. I think Alex, Bruce, and everyone's kind of spoken to this is what this industry represents and what will happen if the governments get truly behind it, full-heartedly, with infrastructure, with capital, with real enablement, and I think that's what we're all motivated to see. And hopefully that'll continue to happen, not just in one country, but many. I don't think even one country can take dominance, but I think everyone needs to play a role here.
All right, thank you. Second question. I like this one because there's so much room to play. What are the common mistakes companies make trying to break into the Chinese market? We all have a bit of an opinion around this, right? Who wants to go first?
I'll keep my answer short and sweet. Asia is not one big market. It's different cultures, it's different people. It's going to be very different. You cannot see it as one market. So that's the number one mistake. They think Asia is one market.
Yeah, Asia as one market. That is like, John, we've talked about this before. Like, that's a major kind of challenge for investors, right? Seeing Asia as one place, and as you said, right, being successful in Hong Kong and Singapore doesn't really mean you're in the Asia markets, and each market is a completely new kind of breakthrough in every single country within the Asia region. Yeah, so that kind of lump it all together mentality is definitely the most common mistake. Manav, can you talk a little bit about common mistakes, maybe focus on the Chinese market, breaking into the Chinese market?
I mean, I think if we draw parallels to even large non-food companies that have tried to enter China, Facebook failed, Google failed, LinkedIn succeeded, Nintendo succeeded, Airbnb succeeded. Sorry, Nintendo failed, but then succeeded. So there's a wide array of parallels, I think, to draw from other companies. And I think if the thread, it properly understand the local market, the culture, the importance of the right partnerships, and also properly did research to understand how to tackle the market. I think also engaging local senior leadership and management versus trying to put boots on the ground internationally and then try and figure it out. So I think there's a lot of common threads, but understanding the market, doing research, putting in strong partnerships, collaborations, seeing who your competitors are, understanding the nuances, putting local leadership and management in place, and then also drawing parallels from other categories. If we look at electronics, and if we look at, I don't know, IT, tech, SaaS, there's so many good examples of companies that have done well and companies that haven't for a variety of reasons. So, but most of those parallels are because, just a real strong lack of local partnerships. And I think because this is such a regulated space or such an unknown space, it's even more important. Maybe it's a general answer, but, I think it's a general approach.
No, great answer. I love that parallel insights, right? Like, it's very important to look past just one sector and learn from other sectors. Alex, do you have anything to add? Alex.
He's thinking.
I think, yeah, I mean, look, I think, my screen is frozen. I think actually it's both questions. I mean, if you compare China and the EU, right? I mean, we talked about introducing new companies and regulations. food acts, and that makes it very, very difficult for bringing new food. So if you look at most of the, again, food ingredients companies, some of them food tech companies, they want to break into, because it's one country that's 1.3 billion. If you want to break into the EU, you have a few 100 million. Various different culture makes it a lot more difficult. And I think this is, China cannot be compared as a one country. You need to see China as most probably more as of a EU that has various different regions, has various different tastes. People in the north like more sugar. Maybe John can elaborate on that. People in the south like less sugar. So there's always these various things going on here and there. And I think thinking that, again, being a little bit hypocritical, selling a few burgers in Hong Kong means I have the solution for China is not the solution for China. It's like, and you cannot tackle it with one solution. Most probably you need to find your niche, you start out there, and then you continue. There's not one strategy. And like Manav said, I mean, there's enough example on the dairy industry where people Danone tried various times to conquer China and failed various times for obvious reasons. And I think these are things, there is a lot of, how do you say, there is a lot of homework to be made. And how do you say, China is a huge market, but you're not the first one trying to tackle it. So it's not going to be low-hanging fruits, and especially not on the plant-based side.
That is so awesome. Like, I love everything that's been said. If I can kind of like conclude it a little bit here, everyone has talked about this, right? Asia is not one market. China even is not one market. It's very complex here. You got to do your homework, get to the facts, build your business based on facts. And I mean, at the end of it, it's worth it. It's a huge market. You know, there's big impact and big money to be made, but you gotta go in there with your eyes wide open to be successful or to be impactful. So I think we are actually running out of time for this session. I just enjoyed this so much. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us.